Ben Bujanowski, Solutions Engineer from Oracle. Spent some time with you a few weeks ago conducting a demonstration presentation on Oracle Cloud EPM, primarily focusing on planning and budgeting. So I wanted to address a couple of your questions you had today regarding rate escalation as it applies to projects within planning and budgeting. And when I discuss the projects module that is a part of our enterprise EPM cloud product, I communicated that the projects module is essentially a pre-built, pre-configured module based on best practice methodology when it comes to planning and forecasting for projects. So a lot of the content that I demonstrated as far as like a couple of screenshots that was part of the content that indicated that that material was essentially out of the box, pre-built, pre-configured. So the first question that you had was regarding how do we essentially conduct or execute a plan, budget, or forecast in a top-down methodology where it applies to planning for projects. Unfortunately, the pre-configurability in the projects module for the solution does not contain any pre-configured top-down content. So that would be something that would essentially require a requirements discussion with a potential system integrator to help you construct, formulate, and obviously execute that type of plan. I think one of the key highlights that I focused on in my window time for my presentation was the configurability of our solution. So absolutely, that's something that can be achieved or attained, but it will require some additional build out within the configurable components of our solution. Now, the second question, applying any sort of changes to future years when it comes to rate escalation, I have just a very brief sort of depiction of exactly how that is handled. So as you can see my screen here, this screen was contained, it's the interface for our EPM cloud planning and budgeting solution. I'm going to navigate into the projects module, and I'm going to navigate into the expenses component of that module, and I'm going to navigate to a particular project that we have. And just to let you know, everything that you see here is part of our our demo environment. So none of this is tailored or constructed specifically for you, the client. This is just kind of the same demo content that we use for the majority of our customers. So I'm going to navigate to this generic project right here, and I mentioned the scalability during my presentation, the ability to navigate across different scenarios, plan, forecast, long range plan, strategic planning. You're not limited to these. You can certainly create your own. There's no limitation on that. Same with versioning as well. We'll get to that here in a minute. So here you see all of our expense assumptions for labor, material, equipment, or other. We've got a number of phases, employee resources, and that kind of ties back to the workforce planning solution. That's part of our EPM enterprise cloud solution. I touched on that very briefly during my presentation. And then here we can apply our different labor rates for the year total, as well as the number of FTEs, and then it calculates our total labor expense. Now, if we want to take it a step further, and this addresses your concern on escalating the rates or changing the rates for the next 7 forecast or plan years. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to right click and it brings up an additional menu of items, and I'm going to click on standard rate assumptions. So you can see here I've got, again, standard rate assumptions for this particular organizational unit, for this particular scenario, for this particular version. So we can go out and we can change the cost or the billing rate for particular materials. And again, you're not bound by what you see here. This, even though this contains, and I was stressing that this is essentially a mostly pre-configured, pre-built content, it's up to you, the customer, to go ahead and fill out and configure it with your own metadata, right? So project element, I mentioned the versions, the different types of materials, unit of measure, that can all be configured specifically to your customer needs, right? So we can come in here and we can enter updated billing rates. We can change those. We can save it, and then we can come back to the previous screen and we can recalculate our impact, recalculate the expenses, and then see the impact that it has to not just the organizational unit, but to the total organization, or in your case, the total plant. And it's very easy. Again, I mentioned the multiple versions. We can create a we can create these new rates for these future years for this particular version. Then we can, furthermore, we can copy those rates and paste them to another version, right? So we can look at a most likely, a target version. You can create any number of versions, right? We can call something draft. We can call something draft 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. You're really not bound or limited by the number of sort of slices of data that you can create. And that kind of goes back to the scalability and the power of the solution when it comes to creating new versions, new scenarios, etc. So hopefully that answered your question when it comes to the rate escalation, and specifically for, I think you were looking at 7 years of forecast. We're looking at actually at plan, but again, that could be applied to forecast as well, depending on what type of scenarios you have in your dimensionality, and then address the first part of the question on coming up with a total expense and drilling back into determining a rate. That's something that would need to be constructed and configured along with your system integrator. Thank you.